The china clinks before the words land. White candles throw soft halos across the table, catching on crystal stems, and silver knives lined like a parade. I'm still in my coat, one glove half off, when my mother's gaze slides past me and fixes on my daughter. Madison's curls are shining her red velvet dress bright as a cardinal against winter white. She stands there with both hands cupped around a wrapped gift she made herself. Ribbon, slightly crooked hope, perfectly straight. Barbara doesn't see any of it. She's measuring the room, the posture, the optics. Then with a voice as careful as her napkin fold, she says to my child, "We'll get started without you, dear. This is family dinner." If you've ever felt a door close while you were standing in the doorway, you know that sound. It isn't loud. It's a latch slipping. It's your jaw tightening. It's the sting you feel behind your eyes as you keep your face calm for the sake of the person you love most. Madison's knuckles pale around the gift. My father's fork pauses midair and lowers without a word. The turkey scent is warm. The welcome is not. Before I go on, tell me where you're listening from down in the comments. And if you've ever been treated like you didn't belong at your own family table, hit that like button and share this with someone who'll understand. It lets more folks find stories like this and maybe find a little courage of their own. To understand how we got to that table and to the sentence that would split our lives into a before and an after, you need to know the house I grew up in and the silence that lived there. I'm Kimberly, a corporate attorney who learned early that the rules are different depending on who's allowed to break them. I make my living pulling chaos into order, tight timelines, billion-dollar mergers, documents that have to sing to people who don't want to hear them. I work hard, I show up on time, and I take care of my daughter. Madison is the reason the light flips on every morning in our little townhouse. The reason there's always a bowl of clementines on the counter and a museum membership on the fridge. Her father faded out before she arrived. I built a life that didn't require him to show up. Barbara, my mother, likes certainty you can photograph. Matching sweaters, polished floors, a dining room that looks like a magazine spread nobody eats in. She loved me in grades and trophies, not in messy crying or second chances. My father Thomas kept the peace with soft eyes and softer words, a shoreline worn down by weather he refused to name. If there was a wrong thing to say, I'd find it. If there was a right thing to display, Barbara would display it. That's the rhythm I learned to dance, to do more, be less. Don't disturb the centerpiece. This year, though, the invitations felt different. Barbara called early voice bright, asking us to come for Christmas. She had complimented Madison at the school play, even clapped first. She'd sat upright in a wooden auditorium seat like it was a throne and told anyone who'd listen she was so proud. Thomas had taken Madison fishing in the fall and sent me cell phone photos of them in matching caps. Her grin, his laugh lines, I hadn't seen in years. "A real Christmas with grandparents," Madison said, bouncing on our couch curls flying. I said yes before my doubts caught up. Jasmine, my best friend, listened over coffee while Madison was at a playdate. She stirred cream into her mug, giving me the look a friend gives when she's watched you walk into this movie before. "People like your mom don't change overnight," she said. They rehearse. I smiled and said it felt different. Jasmine squeezed my wrist and told me to keep my phone on. Red flags came dressed as concern. Barbara asked what Madison would wear and suggested something more presentable than the red velvet dress we'd picked out together. She forgot to tell me Amanda and her family would join until after I'd said yes, then spoke about Charlotte's poise and William's advanced classes the way some people talk about cars. My father called separately rare for him and cleared his throat around a warning he couldn't deliver. "Just be on time," he said, wishing that could fix what was crooked. Work grew louder as December dimmed. The European regulators had started tapping the brakes on a merger I'd shepherded for months, a precise machine with one stubborn gear. Alexandra, my senior partner, asked if I could be on call in case Brussels woke up cranky on Christmas morning. "Family first," she promised, "unless the house is on fire." I made my boundary clear and said I'd step out only if there was real smoke. She agreed. I wanted so badly to give Madison a holiday uninterrupted by the job that pays for the house, the school, the art sets. I wanted it more than I wanted sleep. The night before Christmas, snow dusted the streetlights, and our townhouse smelled like cinnamon. Madison laid out her gifts on our oak table, a hand-painted wooden lure box for my father, tiny trout carefully brushed on the lid, and a photo album she'd made for my mother, with spaces left for future memories. She ran her finger over the blank places and asked if we'd fill them. "We'll try," I said, because children deserve hope more than they deserve accuracy. Morning came early, as Christmas does for 10-year-olds. We opened our little stack in pajamas, her delight loud enough to wake the apartment next door. She gave me a bracelet she'd made at art club, tiny clay beads, each color a memory, and I promised to never take it off. When she put on the red dress and twirled the skirt flared like a bell. "Do I look okay for Grandma?" she asked. "You look perfect," I answered. Meaning it. Barbara's neighborhood wears its holidays like a competition. White lights traced every roof line. The wreaths looked imported. The walkway pots were stuffed with poinsettias arranged like a diagram. Thomas opened the door before I knocked twice. "There's my fishing buddy," he said, bending to Madison's height. She launched at him, her gift tucked under one arm. In the foyer mirror, I watched his face soften, a man who has always wished he were braver. The house smelled like roasting turkey and pine cleaner. Somewhere, a choral record spun, and the heat clicked on and off like a metronome. Barbara swept in from the kitchen with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. Her sweater fit like it had been tailored by a ruler. She hugged Madison the way someone hugs a guest who arrived without a bottle of wine. "Those curls are sweet," she said, scanning the dress. A little bright for the camera, but sweet. She gave me a kiss that felt like an item checked off a list and asked if I'd remembered the pie. I said yes. She checked her watch. At precisely 11, the doorbell rang and Amanda breezed in. Cheeks kissed, compliments, dispensed a bottle of French. Something placed just so on the counter. Greg shook hands like a business deal and drifted toward my father's Safe Topics golf weather, the new clubhouse renovation. Charlotte and William stood perfectly, as if posture were a subject at school, and they were both earning A's. Amanda introduced them to Madison and suggested they take her to the game room, which turned out to be a formal sitting room with a chessboard no one touched. As the kids went upstairs, Barbara's shoulders lowered, as if the room had improved by subtraction. Appetizers arrived on china, usually reserved for gods. "Cucumber canapes," Barbara announced, angling the plate toward Amanda. "Gluten-free, darling, just for you." When I reached for one, Barbara's eyes slid over me. "Careful, Kimberly," she said lightly, like a joke you're not allowed to refuse. "You know how you struggled after Madison." Thomas's fork paused again. No one said anything, because ignoring rudeness feels a lot like manners when you've been trained that way. That's when my phone buzzed. "Alexandra." A single line on the lock screen, urgent Brussels escalating. "Need you ASAP." I stepped into the hall to call her because some fires do not wait for dessert. Her voice came tight. "The commission wanted answers today, European time. Half our team was unreachable on vacation. The other half didn't know the file like I did. 2 hours, maybe 3. I looked back at the staircase toward the faint sound of kids not playing games together. I've juggled knives my whole adult life. This one had mother engraved on one blade and provider on the other. I walked into the living room and said I had a work emergency. "Alexandra's sorry. Brussels is Brussels." I asked if Madison could stay. I'd be back before dinner. Thomas nodded immediately. Barbara's smile hardened into glass. "On Christmas," she said, like I'd tracked snow onto her good carpet. "It can't be helped," I answered. "Please make sure Mad feels included." Barbara dipped her chin as if accepting an apology I hadn't offered. Upstairs, I found Madison perched on the edge of the sofa, hands folded over the gift for my father, resting her feet on the rung, the way I taught her not to slouch furniture that isn't ours. Charlotte scrolled her phone with the concentration of a surgeon. William pretended not to stare. I knelt in front of my daughter and told her the truth. It's the big deal, honey. I have to step out for a bit, but I'll be back before dinner. She nodded with brave eyes and a small swallow. I know your job is important. I hugged her longer than the moment allowed and whispered that she can call me for anything in the world. She nodded again. Maybe Grandma will let me help in the kitchen, she said, trying to tuck her hope back in. At the top of the stairs, I paused long enough to text Jasmine on call. At my parents'. If anything feels off, pick up, please. She replied with a heart and a reminder, doors stay unlocked at her house always. On my way out, Barbara trailed me to the foyer, hands wiping non-existent crumbs from her sweater. Some things never change, she murmured, lining up my boots with the mat. You leaving your child to chase? Whatever this is? It's remarkable the number of words that can fit in a tiny breath shame judgment history. I zipped my coat and told her I'd be back in a few hours. Just make sure she feels welcome, I said again, because I needed to hear myself say it to someone who might not. Barbara smiled like a portrait. The drive downtown was quick on empty holiday roads. The building's lobby smelled like lemon polish and quiet. I tapped my badge, rode an elevator past my reflection, and walked into the conference room where Alexandra had already spread the file like a map of a country about to be redrawn. We work the way you work when the clock on the wall belongs to another continent clean fast without complaint. For the first hour, texts pinged from Madison like small birds tapping the window. Charlotte doesn't want to play. Grandma says my dress is too childish. She's letting them open one present early. I sent back reassurance the way you do when you're using your thumbs to hold up two worlds. Then the messages slowed. The room felt colder. We assembled our response with the precision our clients pay for and hit send into the Atlantic. Alexandra thanked me, her relief visible even in her posture, and suggested we wait for initial feedback. I was already packing my bag. The snow had stopped outside, and the light had leaned toward late. Back in the car, the heater hummed, and the bracelet Madison made knocked lightly against the steering wheel as I turned out of the garage. I could picture her upstairs, small legs tucked under, trying to be good in a house that measured goodness in posture and silence. The subdivision's white lights appeared again like a runway telling planes what to do. My jaw ached from holding. When I turned onto my parents' street, their dining room glowed warm behind the front windows. It was 5:30. I eased to the curb and sat for one last second with the engine ticking. Inside that house, plates were being lifted, napkins set down, polite laughter arranged beside the centerpiece. I took my key from my purse, the same brass I'd used as a teenager to sneak quiet breaths on the back porch, and let myself in. The lingering smell of turkey met me first. So did the quiet of a house that knows it's already chosen its sides. From the foyer, I could hear silver against china, and my mother's voice in its company tone. I walked toward the dining room and paused just outside the doorway. 6 chairs, 2 candles. No place set for me. No place set for Madison. I felt the bracelet bead yellow for the beach green, for the trail blue for that summer sky press into my palm as my hand closed. The candle flames bent slightly in a draft I couldn't feel. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaked like a small ship shifting in a harbor. "Where's Madison?" I asked. No one answered right away, and in that breath between question and reply, I knew the room I was about to walk into and the room I would walk out of forever. The dining room felt smaller the moment I stepped inside. Candlelight flickered against polished silver, catching on faces that wouldn't meet my eyes. The air was heavy with the scent of turkey and rosemary, but it carried no warmth. My mother's voice was the first to break the silence, calm and clipped. "You finally decided to join us, Kimberly. Where's Madison?" Her question landed like a test I hadn't studied for. I looked at the 6 places set around the table, each one arranged with mathematical precision, none for my daughter. My father stared down at his plate. Amanda busied herself cutting her son's meat, though his fork was perfectly capable of doing the job. She wasn't feeling well, my mother said after a beat. She's resting in the guest room. The tone was casual, dismissive, like she was discussing a misplaced napkin. My stomach twisted. Without a word, I turned and walked upstairs. The hallway felt longer than I remembered. When I reached the guest room, I knocked softly and called her name. A small, broken sound answered from behind the door. Madison sat curled on the bed, her dress wrinkled, her eyes swollen from crying. When she saw me, she ran into my arms so fast I nearly lost my balance. "Mom," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Grandma said, I'm not her real granddaughter." For a second, I couldn't breathe. I pulled her closer, feeling the tremor in her shoulders, the hitch in every breath. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" She told me everything in short, stumbling sentences. How she'd asked to open a present like her cousins. How Barbara had looked down at her and said there weren't any gifts for her because she wasn't really family. How she'd been sent upstairs for disrupting dinner. Each word carved into me like a blade. My daughter, my beautiful, kind 10-year-old child, had been humiliated in a house that once claimed to love her. When she said Barbara called me trash for having her without a husband, something inside me shifted. Years of keeping the peace, years of swallowing small cruelties cracked apart in one clean line. I wiped the tears from Madison's cheeks. "Get your coat, baby," I said quietly. "We're leaving." "But what about the gifts I made for them?" she asked, still clutching the photo album she'd spent weeks perfecting. "We'll take them with us," I said, my voice steady but low. "They don't deserve them." Before we walked out, I turned on my phone and asked Madison to tell me what had happened one more time. Her voice trembled, but she spoke clearly. I needed her truth to live somewhere outside her pain, somewhere that couldn't be denied later. When she finished, I kissed her forehead and slipped the phone into my purse. We walked down the stairs hand in hand. The dining room fell silent again when we entered. My mother's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Amanda's eyes darted toward the children, who looked down at their plates. "Madison was supposed to stay upstairs," Barbara said, setting her fork down. "She hasn't learned how to behave appropriately yet." The calm I felt wasn't peace. It was the kind of stillness that happens before glass shatters. "Behave appropriately?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "What exactly did she do?" "Mother, she was disrespectful. I won't tolerate that kind of behavior in my home." "She's 10, I said softly. "And you told her she wasn't your granddaughter." Barbara's chin lifted. "I simply told her the truth. She needed to understand her place." Thomas stirred in his chair. "Barbara," she cut him off with a sharp look. "Don't start." I turned to him. "Dad, you were here. You saw what happened. You heard what she said." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The silence that followed said more than words ever could. Madison's hand tightened around mine. "She said I could eat when I learned proper manners," she whispered. I faced my mother fully. "You left a child hungry and crying on Christmas Day," I said. "You told her she wasn't family. You called me trash. Tell me what part of that sounds like love to you." Barbara's expression didn't flicker. "You've always been dramatic, Kimberly. This is exactly why you've never fit in. You make everything about feelings." Amanda stepped in smoothly, voice coated in sugar. "Barbara was just trying to maintain family standards. Surely you understand that." I almost laughed at the word standards. I looked around the table at the people who had watched cruelty unfold and chosen quiet over conscience. "A family that teaches a child she's unworthy doesn't have standards," I said. "It has rot." I took out my phone and held it up. I recorded Madison's account, every word she said about what happened here. Color drained from my mother's face. You wouldn't dare use that against me. This isn't about you, I said. It's about her. Thomas's eyes glistened. Barbara, please, he said softly. You went too far. Barbara turned on him. You've never had the backbone to discipline anyone. That's why she turned out the way she did. I felt something release in me then, not anger, not even sadness, just the weight of years sliding off my shoulders. You're right, I said. I did turn out differently. I learned to work to raise a child alone to love without conditions. And maybe that's what offends you most. Madison stepped forward before I could stop her. Her small voice carried more grace than the room deserved. I worked really hard on your Christmas present, Grandma, she said. I thought you wanted me to be your granddaughter. She paused, her lip trembling. I'm sorry I wasn't good enough. No one breathed. My father's tears fell silently. Even Amanda looked away. Barbara only crossed her arms. Emotional manipulation, she muttered. She gets that from you. I reached for Madison's hand again. Come on, sweetheart. I turned to my father. Say goodbye, Dad. He stood and came around the table. When he knelt to Madison's height, his voice cracked. I'm so sorry, honey. None of this is your fault. She nodded, too polite to look away. Goodbye, Grandpa. Barbara rose, napkin falling from her lap. If you walk out that door, Kimberly don't expect to be welcomed back. I met her eyes. That's the difference between us, Mother. I don't confuse control with love. For a moment, no one spoke. Then I reached into my purse, pulled out the bracelet Madison made me that morning, and showed it to her. You see this? Every bead is a memory. None of them include you. The words weren't sharp. They were simply true. I turned toward the doorway, feeling Madison's small hand slip into mine again. As we stepped outside, the cold air hit like clean water. Snow was still falling soft and soundless, covering the walkway she'd lined so perfectly with poinsettias. Madison's breath came out in white puffs. She looked up at me, her face pale in the porch light. Are we still family, Mom? I knelt to meet her eyes. We're the best kind of family, sweetheart, one built on love. Nothing can change that. We walked to the car without looking back. The windows of the house glowed behind us, gold and false, like a painting of warmth that didn't exist inside. I could still see my father's shadow in the window, motionless, watching us leave. When I started the engine, Madison leaned against my shoulder. I reached over and pulled a blanket from the back seat around her. Her body was trembling less now, her breathing steadying. The tires crunched over fresh snow as we pulled away. A block down, I stopped long enough to text Jasmine. We're coming. Don't ask yet. Just open the door. Her reply came before the next red light. Always. The roads were empty, the world wrapped in winter quiet. Madison fell asleep before we reached the main road, her hand still tangled in mine. The street lights glowed on the windshield, each one passing like a slow heartbeat. Somewhere between the highway and the familiar turn toward Jasmine Street, the adrenaline faded. What replaced it wasn't rage. It was clarity. I knew exactly what had just happened, what had always been happening in smaller doses. This wasn't a single cruel remark. It was a legacy ending. By the time we pulled into Jasmine's driveway, the snow had turned to flurries. Her porch light was already on. She opened the door before I reached the steps, eyes wide, arms outstretched. What happened? She whispered, seeing Madison's tear-streaked face. Later, I said, Can we come in? Of course. She wrapped Madison in a hug, guiding her toward the couch, where her niece and nephew were playing a board game. Come sit with them, honey. They've been waiting for someone new to play. Madison hesitated, then allowed herself to be pulled in by their laughter. I stood in the doorway, the warmth of the living room finally thawing the chill that had sunk deep into my bones. Jasmine came back with 2 mugs of cocoa and set one in front of me. "I don't know the story yet," she said quietly, "but I know that look." "What did she do?" I took a slow breath. She told Madison she wasn't her granddaughter, in front of everyone. Jasmine's hand froze around her cup. She said that, to a child. I nodded, and they all sat there, every one of them. For a while, the only sound was the faint ticking of the clock above the mantel and the murmur of the kids' laughter in the next room. Finally, Jasmine reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing leaving," she said. "Don't doubt that for a second." I nodded, though my throat tightened. "I recorded Madison's story. I don't know what I'll do with it yet. I just needed to have proof." Jasmine's voice softened. "You've spent your whole life trying to earn a kind of love she was never capable of giving. Maybe tonight you finally stopped trying." I didn't answer. I just sat there watching Madison on the rug, smiling through exhaustion, as she joined a board game she didn't know the rules to. The sight of her laughter, shaky but real, felt like a breath I hadn't taken in years. Somewhere deep down, I knew this was the night everything shifted. The child who had been shamed was safe. The mother who had endured too much had finally drawn her line, and the woman who'd been waiting for her own mother's acceptance had stopped waiting. Outside, the snow kept falling, erasing the tracks behind us. Inside, Madison's laughter rose softly over the hum of the heater, bright and steady, carrying us into the quiet that comes after a storm. Jasmine's house was still when the children finally drifted off to bed. Madison slept curled up on the pull-out sofa in the guest room. Her hair spread across the pillow like a small halo. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, just listening to the even rhythm of her breathing. It was the first peaceful sound I'd heard all day. In the kitchen, Jasmine was rinsing the cocoa mugs. The light over the sink threw a warm circle on the counter, and for a while, neither of us spoke. When she finally turned toward me, her eyes were sharp with quiet anger. "What are you going to do?" I sat at the table, hands wrapped around a half-empty cup of water. "I don't know yet," I said. "But I can't let it slide. Not after what she did to Madison." Jasmine pulled out the chair across from me. "Then start by protecting her, not punishing your mother. There's a difference." Her words sat heavy in the air. I knew she was right. Anger might have carried me through the evening, but what Madison needed now was safety, not revenge. I nodded slowly. "I'm going to talk to someone at the firm tomorrow, someone who knows family law." Even on Christmas week, Jasmine asked, half a smile breaking through her worry. Especially then. The next morning, sunlight poured through the blinds, catching dust in golden lines. Madison woke up quiet but calm. I made her pancakes in the shape of snowmen, and she ate most of them before glancing up at me. "Are we ever going back there?" she asked. "No," I said gently, "not for a long time." She thought for a moment. "I'm glad. That was all. No bitterness, no questions, just relief." Children have a way of understanding what adults spend years explaining to themselves. Later that day, after Jasmine's guests arrived for brunch, I slipped into her home office and called David Harrington, a colleague from the firm who handled family cases. He answered on the second ring, his voice low and steady. "Kimberly, I didn't expect to hear from you on Christmas weekend. You all right?" I told him everything in short sentences. He didn't interrupt, just listened. When I finished, there was a long pause on the line. "That's emotional abuse," he said quietly. If you want to put legal distance between your daughter and your mother, we can start documenting it. You already have the recording. Yes. Madison's voice and all. Good. Keep it safe. We'll meet after the holidays, talk options. You did the right thing leaving. When I hung up, I felt the first small thread of control weave its way back into the day. It wasn't victory. It was steadiness, the kind that lets you breathe again. That evening, while Madison watched a movie with Jasmine's niece, I stepped outside with my phone. The air was sharp, the sky washed in faint stars. I drafted an email to Alexandra, my senior partner, explaining briefly that I needed a couple of days off to care for Madison. Her reply came within minutes. Take all the time you need, family first. And Kimberly, you did the right thing. I stared at the words for a long time. It was strange how permission spoken kindly could feel like absolution. When I went back inside, Jasmine was waiting by the fireplace. You're not going back tonight, are you? She asked. No, Madison's too shaken. I'll find a hotel tomorrow somewhere close to work. You'll stay here, she said simply. You both will. I have space, and the kids already adore her. I wanted to argue out of habit, but exhaustion won. I thanked her and promised I'd make it up to her someday. She shook her head. That's not how friendship works, Kim. The following morning, Barbara started calling. The first few messages were clipped formal. By afternoon, they turned pleading, then angry. Each voicemail was shorter than the last, her voice climbing from outrage to desperation. I let them all go unanswered. By the second day, my inbox filled with missed calls and messages from numbers I didn't recognize, her friends most likely trying to smooth things over before gossip took root. I ignored those too. Instead, I focused on Madison. We took small walks through the quiet streets, watched winter birds at the park, played cards by the fire. Slowly, I saw color return to her cheeks. One afternoon, she painted something on a scrap of paper and handed it to me. It was a little house under a yellow sun. Inside the window, two stick figures stood side by side. Us, she'd written in neat block letters at the bottom. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat at Jasmine's desk again. I opened a new message and typed a list of names, board members of the community foundation where my mother served as chair. I didn't attach the recording. I didn't have to. My email was measured and factual, no venom, no embellishment. I told them that Barbara Hayes had spoken cruelly to her granddaughter, rejecting her publicly, and that I believed such behavior violated the values their organization claimed to uphold. Then I hit send. When I finally turned off the light, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Not satisfaction, just the quiet certainty that truth had begun its slow, unstoppable work. The next morning, my father called. His voice was thin, as if he hadn't slept. Your mother's been asked to step down from the foundation, he said, and the club, they're reviewing her membership. I waited for anger, maybe guilt, but none came. I'm sorry that's hard for you, Dad, I said. He sighed. No, Kimberly, you don't understand. I'm not calling to complain. I'm calling to say you were right. For a moment, I said nothing. It had been years since those words had passed between us. He went on, voice shaking. I spent 40 years pretending that keeping peace was the same as keeping a family together. But seeing Madison cry like that, I can't excuse it anymore. The sound of his honesty startled me more than anything else could have. What are you going to do? I asked. I told her if she doesn't get help, I'm filing for divorce. The line went quiet, except for the faint hum of static. I gripped the phone tighter. You really said that I did. Maybe too late, but I did. I wanted you to know. Thank you, I whispered. After we hung up, I stood by the window, watching the snow melt from the eaves. For the first time in years, I felt compassion for my father, not pity, but recognition. He was finally trying to stand up even if it took a lifetime to find his footing. Later that afternoon, another call came, this time from Catherine Reynolds, the vice chair of the foundation. She spoke carefully, her tone a blend of professionalism and quiet sympathy. "Kimberly, I received your email. I wanted you to know the board takes this seriously. Family values mean something, and so does accountability. I appreciate that," I said. "Several of us have noticed Barbara's behavior for a while now. This incident only confirmed what many suspected. We'll handle it discreetly, but it will be handled." When I ended the call, I felt neither guilt nor triumph, only relief. Barbara had built her life around appearance, and now the truth was pulling the curtains open one ring at a time. That evening, I found Madison sitting by the window with Jasmine's niece. They were coloring side by side, laughing softly. Madison looked up when she saw me and smiled. It was small, but real. Jasmine came over and placed a hand on my shoulder. "You look lighter," she said. "Maybe because I finally stopped holding my breath," I answered. The next few days passed quietly. Barbara stopped calling, though her silence carried its own message. Thomas sent updates by text, short ones, careful not to reopen wounds. I didn't reply much, only once, to tell him Madison was doing well, and that she asked about him. On the morning of the third day, I received a final voicemail from my mother. Her voice was hoarse, the tone different from before. "You've destroyed everything," she said. "Are you satisfied now?" I listened to it twice, then deleted it. She still didn't understand this wasn't destruction. It was truth, finally taking its shape. That night, I tucked Madison into bed at Jasmine's house. She looked up at me sleepy-eyed. "Are we going home soon? Tomorrow?" I said. "Our home, not theirs." She nodded. "Can we make cookies when we get there?" I smiled. "As many as you want." After she fell asleep, I sat alone in the living room. The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the furnace. I thought about the years I'd spent trying to win my mother's approval, how each small victory had only pushed the goal further away. I thought about Madison, how one cruel sentence had cracked open the truth I'd refused to see. Outside, the wind picked up brushing snow against the windows. Somewhere out there, Barbara was facing the emptiness she'd built for herself. I didn't need to see it. Some consequences don't require witnesses. In the dim light, I glanced at Madison's painting, still pinned to the refrigerator. The little house, the yellow sun, the two figures standing together inside. Us. It struck me then how quiet healing can be, not a single moment of triumph, but a series of steady breaths, one after another, until you realize the air finally feels safe to breathe again. I turned off the lamp and stood at the doorway for a long time, listening to the sound of my daughter sleeping in the next room. The kind of peace I'd been chasing all my life had found me at last, not in my mother's approval, but in my own decision to stop needing it. Tomorrow, we would go home. And from there, I would start building something new, something strong enough that Madison would never again question where she belonged. The morning we returned home, the air carried the sharp quiet of late December. The roads were still edged with snow, but sunlight softened everything it touched. Madison sat beside me in the car, a small smile forming as we turned down our familiar street. The sight of our townhouse, the blue shutters, the wreath she'd helped me hang earlier that month, brought a kind of stillness I hadn't felt in years. Inside, the house smelled faintly of cinnamon and pine from the candles we'd left burning before the holiday. Madison went straight to the living room and started unpacking the few gifts she'd brought from Jasmine's house. I set our bags down and took a long look around the space we'd built together. The worn rug, the books stacked unevenly on the shelf, the watercolor paintings taped to the wall. It wasn't grand, but it was honest. Every corner was ours. After lunch, Madison curled up on the couch with her sketchpad while I opened my laptop at the kitchen table. The screen filled with unread messages, some from the firm, others from unfamiliar addresses. I recognized several names from my parents' social circle, people who'd once sent Christmas cards signed "Love from the Hazes." Now their emails carried subject lines like, "So sorry to hear what happened," and "Thinking of you and Madison." I didn't open any of them. My focus shifted to a message from my father. It was short, almost hesitant. "I'd like to see Madison, if you'll allow it. No one else, just me." I made her something. I read it twice, the words tilting between regret and hope. Madison was in her own world, sketching a bluebird in flight. "Sweetheart, I said Grandpa wants to visit just him. Would you like that?" She paused, the pencil hovering over the page. "Did he say sorry to you?" "He did," I said softly. "He knows what happened wasn't right." After a long moment, she nodded. "Then yes." When my father arrived 2 days later, he looked smaller somehow, the way age shows more plainly when pride has been stripped away. In his hands was a carved wooden box painted with small trout in bright colors. "For you," he told Madison, his voice shaking. "I want it to match the one you made me." Madison traced the painted fish with her finger. "It's beautiful," she whispered. He crouched down to her level. "You're a wonderful girl, Madison. What your grandmother said was wrong. I should have stopped her. I'm sorry I didn't." Her eyes studied him, careful and quiet. "Mom stood up for me," she said. "Will you stand up next time?" His answer came in a single nod, eyes wet. "I will." That visit was short, but it marked something real. When he left, I noticed Madison's shoulders were lighter, as though a piece of the weight she'd been carrying had finally eased. A week later, the new year began, and with it, a rhythm that felt almost normal again. Madison started seeing a child therapist named Dr. Wilson, who specialized in family trauma. Her office was a sunlit space filled with plants and watercolor prints. During the first session, I waited in the lobby, watching snow melt from the windowsill, while soft classical music played through hidden speakers. When Madison came out, she was holding a small clay heart the color of lilacs. "Dr. Wilson says this means healing," she told me. We stopped for hot chocolate on the way home, and for the first time since Christmas, she laughed without hesitation. The sound was light and unguarded, the kind of laugh that reminds you why you keep fighting. At night, after she went to bed, I worked from the kitchen table again. Alexandra had eased me back into the firm, protecting my schedule from unnecessary chaos. She'd sent a card that said simply, "Family first. Always." I kept it tucked under my keyboard. But my mother's presence lingered like static. Her reputation had begun unraveling in the weeks following Christmas. The foundation confirmed she'd resigned from the board, and the country club issued a formal statement thanking her for past service. Even her closest friends, the ones who once echoed her every opinion, had gone quiet. One evening, a courier delivered an envelope with my mother's handwriting. Inside was a letter, written in her usual cursive neat, controlled, not a single word crossed out. "Kimberly, I understand you feel hurt by what transpired. Things were said in anger and perhaps taken out of context. I would like to see Madison and apologize properly. We are family, and family deserves second chances." I read the letter twice, feeling nothing but the familiar chill of her tone. Even her apology carried hierarchy, phrased to restore her authority, not to rebuild connection. I placed it back in the envelope and left it unopened on the counter for 3 days before finally dropping it into the trash. That same week, Jasmine came over with groceries and 2 cups of coffee. She unpacked vegetables while I sliced lemons for tea. "You heard from her again?" she asked. I nodded. "A letter this time." Jasmine glanced toward the trash bin, then back at me. You didn't respond, did you? No. There's nothing left to say. She nodded approvingly. That's not cruelty, you know. It's protection. That night, after Madison fell asleep, I replayed Jasmine's words. Protection. It wasn't about revenge anymore, not about proving a point or reclaiming dignity. It was about drawing a boundary wide enough that my daughter could grow inside it, untouched by the kind of love that wounds. A few days later, Thomas called again. His voice sounded steadier this time. Your mother started therapy, he said. They diagnosed her with narcissistic personality disorder. It explains a lot, doesn't excuse it. She's trying, or at least pretending to. I leaned against the counter, tracing the edge of my coffee mug. What do you want me to do with that information, Dad? Nothing, he said quickly. I just wanted you to know I'm still here. And I meant what I said. I'll never let her hurt Madison again. Thank you, I said quietly. That means more than you think. The call ended with a long silence that didn't feel heavy. For once, there was understanding in the space between us. January faded into February. Madison flourished under Dr. Wilson's care, her drawings turning brighter, her confidence returning in small but steady ways. One afternoon, she showed me a picture she'd made at therapy, a tree with deep roots and a swing hanging from one branch. Dr. Wilson says the tree is me, she explained. Because I'm learning how to feel strong again. You are strong, I told her, brushing a curl from her forehead. You always were. At work, I started finding my balance too. The merger I'd saved on Christmas Day had finalized successfully, and Alexandra nominated me for early partnership consideration. I accepted, but quietly. Success felt different now, less like a climb and more like a choice. Every evening, Madison and I cooked dinner together. Sometimes she read aloud while I chopped vegetables. Sometimes we ate in comfortable silence. The house that had once felt too quiet now felt full. Then one afternoon, I found another envelope in the mailbox. This one was from Thomas, not Barbara. Inside was a note written in his careful script. Kimberly, your mother asked me to give you this letter. I told her I wouldn't unless I thought it might bring peace, not harm. She wrote it after our last session. Read it if you choose. Either way, I'll respect your decision. I turned the second page over, seeing Barbara's handwriting again, less rigid this time, shakier. To Madison, it began. I'm sorry for the words I said that day. They came from fear, not truth. You are my granddaughter. I was wrong to make you feel otherwise. It wasn't enough, but it was something, a sentence of recognition, small and late. I folded the page carefully and placed it in a drawer. Madison didn't need to read it now. Maybe someday, when time had softened the memory, it would mean something. That evening, Madison found me standing by the window looking out at the quiet street below. Are you okay, Mom? She asked. I smiled faintly. I am, sweetheart. Just thinking. About Grandma. Yes. Do you still love her? I hesitated before answering. I think I love the idea of what she could have been. But sometimes loving someone means knowing they can't come close to you anymore. Madison nodded, her face thoughtful. Dr. Wilson says love should make you feel safe. She's a smart woman, I said, pulling her into a hug. That night, I sat on the porch with a blanket over my lap and a mug of tea cooling in my hands. The neighborhood was quiet, save for the soft rustle of wind through bare trees. For the first time, I didn't feel haunted by what had happened. The anger had burned away, leaving something steadier, resolve, maybe even forgiveness, though not the kind that invites someone back. Inside, Madison slept peacefully. Her laughter, her art, her resilience Those were the sounds of healing. My father was learning his own lessons. Barbara was facing her silence. The family I'd once tried to fix was unrecognizable now, but the one I'd built a small, honest life, filled with love that didn't wound, was stronger than I'd ever imagined. The next morning, sunlight poured through the window like a quiet promise. Madison ran in barefoot and smiling, waving a piece of paper. "Dr. Wilson says I graduated," she said proudly. "No more therapy unless I want to come back." I lifted her into my arms, laughing. Then today, we celebrate. As we twirled in the kitchen, the old pain loosened its grip a little more. I thought of everything we'd lost that winter and everything we'd found in its place. The house felt warm again, not because of the heat, but because peace had finally learned its way through the door. And somewhere deep inside, I knew this wasn't the end of our story. It was the quiet before the dawn, the space where healing begins to turn into strength. The sun lingered low that evening, spilling soft amber light through the kitchen window. Madison's laughter drifted from the backyard, a sound that once broke me, but now stitched something back together. She was chasing bubbles across the patio, her curls flying her bare feet, slapping gently against the flagstones. I leaned against the doorframe, tea cooling in my hands, and let the stillness wash over me. The quiet wasn't empty anymore. It was earned. For the first time in a long while, the house felt like it belonged entirely to us. No ghosts of judgment, no echoes of my mother's voice. Just peace. Madison turned, waving the bubble wand toward me. "Mom, come outside," she called. I stepped out, the air warm and faintly sweet with the scent of lilacs we'd planted that spring. She pressed the wand into my hand and grinned. "Your turn." I dipped it into the soap and blew. The bubbles caught the light rising slowly before bursting midair. Madison laughed and clapped. Watching her joy made the months before feel distant, almost like a story I'd read instead of lived. When the last of the bubbles faded, we settled on the porch swing. She leaned against me, resting her head on my shoulder. "Do you think Grandma will ever say she's sorry in person?" Her question was simple, but it landed softly in the quiet. I took a moment before answering. Maybe. But an apology isn't something we wait for, sweetheart. It's something we move past. She nodded thoughtfully, tracing her finger along the edge of my sleeve. "I don't feel sad anymore," she said. "I just feel done." Her words carried the wisdom of someone much older. I kissed the top of her head. That's the best kind of healing. A few weeks later, my father came by for a visit. He'd started wearing plaid shirts again, the kind my mother used to call too casual. When Madison opened the door, he knelt down and let her pull him straight to the kitchen to show off the cookies she'd baked. He smiled the entire time, lines of sorrow softening into something gentler. Later, when Madison went upstairs to grab her sketchbook, he turned to me. "Barbara's in therapy 3 times a week now," he said quietly. "It's a start." I nodded. "Good. For her." "I don't expect you to forgive her," he added, eyes heavy but honest. "I just wanted you to know she's trying to understand what she broke." I believe that I said, and I meant it. But I can't let her try to fix it through Madison. Thomas nodded. "I understand." Before he left, he slipped a small envelope across the table. "This is for Madison," he said. "Not a gift, just a letter. I wrote her a story about the fishing trips we'll take when the weather warms." Madison read it that night before bed, smiling through each line. "He wrote about rainbow trout," she said. He remembered my favorite. The next weekend they went fishing together for the first time since that winter. I drove them to the lake near Pine Hollow, watched from the dock as Madison cast her line beside him. When she reeled in a small perch, she squealed, and he clapped like a man seeing sunlight after years underground. As they packed up their things, I noticed the reflection of the setting sun on the water, a line of gold stretching toward them. For once, the past didn't feel like a weight. It felt like a bridge one we'd crossed without looking back. That summer, I took a long weekend off work, something the old me would never have done. Madison and I painted her bedroom a soft sage green and replaced the old curtains with white linen ones that caught the morning light. We filled the shelves with her books and clay creations from therapy. She called it her peace room. On Sunday mornings, Jasmine would drop by with coffee and a grocery bag full of pastries. We'd sit out back while Madison painted on the patio. "You're different now," Jasmine said one morning, handing me a cup. "Lighter." I stopped expecting apologies to rebuild things, I said. "Turns out, peace doesn't need permission." Jasmine smiled. "I'll drink to that." Madison's laughter echoed behind us, bright and free. The simple sound of it reminded me that healing doesn't arrive all at once. It builds quietly, moment by moment, until one day you realize you're standing in sunlight again. By late summer, the world had rearranged itself into something gentle. Barbara remained distant, sending carefully worded letters through Thomas now and then. I never replied, but I kept them in a small box by my desk. Not out of hope, but because they no longer hurt to see. They were proof that I could hold the past without letting it cut me. Work settled into balance. The firm announced my promotion to junior partner, and Alexandra stopped by my office afterward, closing the door behind her. "I wanted to tell you in person," she said, smiling. "You earned this the hard way and the right way." Her words carried more meaning than she knew. I thought of the Christmas morning that started it all the way I'd rushed out to save a deal while my daughter sat in a house that didn't want her. "Thank you," I said quietly. This time, I planned to celebrate properly. That weekend, I invited our closest friends over for a small dinner, Jasmine, her brother, and Thomas. Madison helped set the table, carefully placing wildflowers in mason jars. The evening unfolded with laughter and gentle conversation, the kind of warmth I'd once thought impossible. After everyone left and the dishes were washed, Madison and I sat on the porch again. The sky had turned a deep violet, stars beginning to blink through. The air smelled of rain on warm pavement. "Mom," she said softly, "I think this is my favorite year ever." I looked at her, my heart full. Mine too. We sat there until the crickets began their song and the porch light cast a soft halo around us. I thought about everything that had happened, the cruelty, the confrontation, the quiet rebuilding, and realized that every hard moment had led here to this calm. Barbara's words no longer echoed in my mind. They'd dissolved into lessons about the kind of woman I never wanted to become and the kind of mother I already was. As the first fireflies flickered in the dark, Madison laid her head in my lap. Her voice was sleepy, but sure. "You always make me feel safe, Mom." I brushed a curl from her forehead and whispered, "Always and forever, sweetheart." The house behind us glowed softly through the windows, warm and steady. For once, there was nothing left to fix, only life to live. I watched the night settle around us, the horizon fading into quiet blue. Peace didn't arrive like forgiveness. It arrived like morning after a long storm, gentle, certain, and full of promise. Some wounds don't fade because we forget. They fade because we finally let go. If this story touched something in you, tell me where you're listening from. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you know someone finding their own peace after family hurt, share this story with them. Thank you for being part of this circle of strength where healing isn't loud, it's steady, and it lasts.